Karina Holt was humiliated in front of 50 strangers at a grocery store in Prince George's County, Maryland. A man in a navy blazer didn't just complain. He studied her name tag, then tore her apart. "You people can never get anything right," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "They should fire you." No one defended her. Phones recorded. The crowd just watched. Then her father walked through the door, and the man's face went ghost white. Because this wasn't random. The man was the attorney who destroyed Karina in court 6 months ago during a wrongful arrest hearing. He targeted her then. He targeted her again. But her father isn't just dad. He's an $83 million justice reform donor. And this attorney was sent to break her. What follows isn't just about racism. It's about power, secrets, and a father's hidden war. Subscribe and drop a comment telling us, would you forgive the lie meant to protect you? Karina Holt's hands were steady on the scanner when the man in the navy blazer decided she didn't deserve to exist. Not metaphorically. Actually, he didn't raise his voice at first. That's what made it worse. He studied her name tag like he was memorizing evidence, his eyes cold and calculating, the kind of look that measured exactly how much damage he planned to do. "You people," he said, slow and surgical, "can never get anything right." The words sliced through the self-checkout area at Fairview Market like a blade pulled across glass. Shoppers froze mid-scan. A woman with a cart full of diapers turned her head. A teenager in a Capitals jersey stared. Karina felt the familiar drop in her stomach, the sickening freefall she'd been trying to outrun since last winter. Not again. She forced her voice to stay level. "Sir, I'm happy to help if there's an issue with." "There is an issue." He leaned closer, breath smelling like expensive coffee and entitlement. "The issue is incompetence. And you people always play the victim when you get called out." Her throat tightened. Someone near the produce section pulled out a phone. No one intervened. Karina's pulse hammered in her ears, but she kept her posture straight. She needed this job, needed the routine, needed the proof that she could rebuild after what happened. The part she never talked about. The part that still woke her up at 3 in the morning, heart racing, sheets soaked. "Ma'am, are you even listening?" His voice pitched louder now, performing for the growing audience. "Or is that too much to ask from someone like you?" Karina blinked, once, slowly. Anyone watching would think she stayed calm. But inside, the walls were closing in. She recognized something in his face, something she couldn't place. A flicker of familiarity that sat just out of reach, like a name on the tip of her tongue. Had she seen him before? Where? The man smirked, sensing her hesitation. He turned slightly, making sure every person in the store could hear him. "Honestly," he said, voice dripping with contempt, "they should fire you." The air in the store thickened. Karina's hands trembled under the counter. And then, the automatic doors slid open. A figure stepped through, silhouetted against the afternoon light. Karina's breath caught. No, not here. Not now. Because the man who just walked in wasn't a stranger. He was her father, and he had no idea what he was about to walk into. Karina's lungs forgot how to work. Not dramatically, not like a panic attack in a movie. Just quietly, like her body decided breathing wasn't worth the effort anymore. The man in the navy blazer was still talking, his voice sharp and performative, but the words blurred into static. All she could hear was the roar of her own pulse, the thud-thud-thud that filled her skull like a warning drum. This has happened before. The memory clawed its way up from the place she'd buried it. Last winter. The hearing. The fluorescent lights. The wooden bench. The attorney who twisted every word she said until she sounded like a liar. A criminal. No. She pressed her palms flat against the counter, nails digging into the laminate. Stay present. Stay calm. But her hands betrayed her. They trembled. Just slightly. Just enough. The man noticed. His eyes flicked down to her fingers, and his smirk widened. "Nervous?" he asked, voice syrupy with false concern. "Guilty conscience, maybe?" A woman near the bakery section whispered something to her husband. Karina's therapist had told her she had a quiet strength most people never develop. A resilience forged in fire. Right now, that fire felt like it was burning her from the inside out. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came. The man leaned in closer, his cologne suffocating. "That's what I thought," he said softly. Privately. Just for her. And that's when she felt it. The full weight of last winter crashing back. The wrongful arrest. The headlines. The neighbors who stopped making eye contact. The job offers that evaporated. The nights she sat in her apartment wondering if her life would ever feel normal again. She'd fought so hard to rebuild. And now this stranger was tearing it down in front of dozens of witnesses. Why does this keep happening to me? Her father was moving closer now, weaving through the aisles, still unaware. Karina wanted to warn him, wanted to mouth the words, "Just leave. Please, don't get involved." But her throat locked. The man's voice rose again, louder, crueler. "You're exactly what's wrong with." And then Langston Holt stepped into view. His eyes found hers, and something in his expression shifted. Not anger. Worse, recognition. Like he'd just walked into a trap he'd been expecting. Subscribe now, because what he knows will shatter everything. Karina's stomach dropped. Why does he look like that? Why does he look like he's seen this man before? Karina's eyes locked on the man's face. "I know you." The thought arrived with absolute certainty, but no explanation. She scanned his features like she was searching for a lost memory. The sharp angle of his jaw, the way his mouth twisted when he spoke, the cold calculation in his eyes that felt less like anger and more like strategy. This wasn't random cruelty. This was personal. But how? Her mind raced backward through months of faces, customers, co-workers, people she'd passed on the street. Nothing clicked. The man watched her, head tilted slightly, like he was waiting for her to figure it out. "Something wrong?" he asked, voice dripping with mock innocence. Karina said nothing. Her father stood 3 aisles away now, frozen mid-step, his eyes moving between her and the man like he was calculating something dangerous. She wanted to ask him, "Do you know this person?" But her tongue felt heavy. The man turned slightly, adjusting his blazer, and that's when she saw it. The briefcase. Sleek. Black. Monogrammed initials on the side. RT. Her breath stuttered. RT. She'd seen those initials before. On a business card. On a document. No. The memory was right there, hovering just beyond her reach, like a word she couldn't pronounce. The man's voice cut through her thoughts. "You really don't remember me, do you?" Karina's pulse spiked. He wants me to remember. That's what this was. Not a random attack. Not a bigot having a bad day. He came here for her. Her knees weakened, but she locked them. "I don't," she started. "Of course you don't." He smiled, thin and sharp. "People like you never do." The phrase landed wrong. People like you. Not about race. About something else. Something specific. Karina's hands curled into fists under the counter. Her father's footsteps grew louder, deliberate, closing the distance. The man glanced toward him, and for just a flash, less than a second, his expression changed. Not fear. Recognition. He knew her father, and her father knew him. Karina's mind spun. What is happening? The man straightened, his smirk fading into something colder. "Well," he said quietly, eyes still on Langston. "This just got interesting." Langston stopped 2 feet away. His voice, when it came, was calm. Too calm. "Step back." The man didn't move. "I said step back." The store held its breath, and Karina realized. Her father wasn't surprised. He wasn't confused. He was ready, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. The man didn't step back. Instead, he leaned in, close enough that Karina could see the tiny bloodshot veins in his eyes, the way his lips pressed together before he spoke, like he was savoring what came next. "You think you can just rebuild your life?" he whispered. "Pretend nothing happened?" Karina's heart slammed against her ribs. He knows. He knows about last winter. The wrongful arrest. The hearing. "You're a fraud," he said, louder now, voice cutting through the store like a verdict. "And everyone here should know it." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A man near the freezer aisle stopped loading his cart. A mother pulled her daughter closer. Karina's vision tunneled. The man turned to face the growing audience, arms spread like a lawyer addressing a jury. "This woman," he announced, voice ringing with false authority, "was accused of theft. Did you know that?" She stood in a courtroom and lied through her teeth. "That's not." Karina's voice cracked. "She manipulated the system, played the victim. And now she's here, handling your groceries, scanning your credit cards." Someone's phone was definitely recording now. Karina saw the red light in her peripheral vision. Her father moved forward, but the man raised a hand. "Oh, don't worry," he said, eyes flicking to Langston. "I'm just educating the public." Langston's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Why isn't he saying anything? The man smiled, sensing victory. "You want to know what I think?" He turned back to Karina, eyes gleaming. "I think you're exactly where you belong. At the bottom. where people like you can't do any real damage. Karina felt tears sting the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of him. The man leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough that only she could hear. And honestly, he paused, smiled. They should fire you. The words hit like a slap. Karina's breath hitched. The store was silent now. 40, maybe 50 people, all watching, all waiting to see what she'd do. No one defended her. No one stepped in. Just phones. Just stares. Just judgment. Her father's hand twitched at his side. And the man, confident, arrogant, drunk on his own power, turned to leave. But then he stopped, looked back, and said the words that made Karina's blood turn to ice. See you again soon, Karina. He knows my name. Not from the name tag. From before. Nobody moved. 47 people. Karina counted them without meaning to, stood scattered across Fairview Market like statues in a museum of her humiliation. A teenage boy near the energy drinks had his phone raised, recording. A woman in yoga pants whispered something to her friend, eyes wide, hungry for drama. An elderly man by the produce section shook his head slowly, though Karina couldn't tell if it was pity or disgust. No one said a word. No one came to her defense. They just watched, like she was a reality show, a spectacle, entertainment. Karina's hands gripped the edge of the counter so hard her knuckles went white. Don't cry. Don't you dare cry. The man in the navy blazer stood near the exit now, briefcase in hand, soaking in the silence like applause. Her father hadn't moved. He stood 3 feet away, shoulders rigid, eyes locked on the man with an intensity that made the air feel electric. But he still wasn't speaking. Why? The question screamed inside Karina's mind. Why isn't he defending me? A phone chimed somewhere in the store, someone's text notification, and it broke the spell. Murmurs started. Low at first, then louder. Did he say she was arrested? I think I remember that story. Wasn't she on the news? Karina's stomach twisted. She could feel their judgment like hands pressing down on her chest. The man smiled, satisfied, and turned toward the door. But Langston's voice finally cut through the silence. You're not leaving. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The man stopped mid-step, turned. His expression shifted, amusement flickering into something sharper. Excuse me. Langston took 1 step forward. Just one. But the entire store felt it. You heard me. The man laughed, but it sounded forced now. Hello. And who exactly are you? Her father. He said the word like an insult. Langston didn't answer. He just stared. And for the first time since this nightmare started, Karina saw something flicker across the man's face. Uncertainty. The crowd sensed it too. Phones angled toward Langston now, capturing whatever was about to happen. Karina's pulse hammered in her throat. The man adjusted his blazer, trying to reclaim control. Look, I don't know what you think you're going to do, but you know exactly who I am. Langston's voice was quiet, deadly. The man's face went pale. Subscribe now, because what happens next will flip everything. Karina's eyes darted between them. What does he mean? The man's hand tightened around his briefcase. And then, barely a whisper, but Karina heard it. He said something that changed everything. You didn't tell her, did you? Karina's breath stopped. Tell me what? The man's words hung in the air like smoke. You didn't tell her, did you? Karina's world tilted. Her father stood perfectly still, but something in his face, something she'd never seen before, flashed across his features. Not anger. Guilt. Tell me what? Karina's voice came out smaller than she intended. Neither man answered. The crowd pressed closer, phones still raised. Everyone sensing they were witnessing something bigger than a customer complaint. The man in the navy blazer took a step back toward the door, his earlier confidence cracking at the edges. This is between you and me, Holt, he said, voice lower now. Not her. Holt. He said her father's name like he'd said it 1,000 times before. Like they had history. Karina's mind raced. How does this stranger know my father? Langston moved forward, not fast, not aggressive, but with the kind of control that made the man flinch. You made it about her the second you opened your mouth, Langston said quietly. The man's eyes darted toward the exit. You were just what? Langston's voice sharpened. Terrorizing my daughter in public? Dragging her past into a grocery store? My past. Karina felt the words like a punch. He knew. Her father knew this man was going to bring up the arrest, the hearing, Wait. Her stomach dropped. He knew this would happen. The realization hit her like cold water. Her father wasn't shocked. He wasn't surprised. He was prepared, like he'd been expecting this confrontation. "Dad," she started. But Langston raised a hand, eyes never leaving the man. "How long have you been following her?" he asked. The store went silent. Karina's breath caught. "Following me?" The man's face flushed. "I don't know what you're—" "How long?" The man swallowed hard. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, 3 weeks. The floor seemed to drop out from under Karina's feet. 3 weeks. This man had been watching her for 3 weeks. A woman near the registers gasped. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." Karina's hands started shaking again, but this time not from fear, from rage. "Why?" Her voice cracked, but she forced the word out. "Why were you following me?" The man looked at her father, then back at her. His expression shifted into something almost pitying. "Because," he said slowly, "I needed to make sure you didn't remember." Karina's blood turned to ice. Remember what? Langston's entire body changed. Not visibly, not in a way most people would notice. But Karina saw it. The shift in his shoulders. The way his weight settled differently on his feet. The slight tilt of his head that made him look less like a father buying oranges and more like something else entirely. Something dangerous. The man saw it too. His smirk returned, but it looked painted on now. Forced. "You can't do anything to me, Holt," he said, voice trying for confidence, but landing somewhere closer to desperation. "Not here. Not with all these witnesses." Langston didn't respond. He just looked at him, and the temperature in the store seemed to drop 10 degrees. Karina had seen her father angry before, when she was 16 and came home past curfew, when her college boyfriend showed up drunk at Thanksgiving. This wasn't anger. This was something colder, more precise, like a blade waiting to fall. "Dad," she whispered. "What's happening?" Langston's eyes flicked to her for half a second, just long enough for her to see the storm behind them, then back to the man. "Take your daughter and go," the man said, but his voice wavered. "This doesn't concern her anymore." "Anymore?" Karina's voice rose. "What does that mean? What doesn't concern me anymore?" The man's jaw tightened. Langston took another step forward, and this time the man actually backed up, his shoulder blades hitting the glass door. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Should we call someone?" But no one moved. They just watched, hypnotized. Karina felt like she was watching her father through water. Everything familiar about him suddenly distorted, unrecognizable. "You need to leave," Langston said, voice low and even. "Right now." The man laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Or what? You'll make a scene? Ruin your precious anonymity." He gestured around the store. "All these people recording? You really want to expose yourself like that?" Expose himself? Karina's confusion spiraled. What is he talking about? Langston's expression didn't change. "I'm not worried about exposure," he said quietly. "I'm worried about what I'll do to you if you stay here another 30 seconds. The threat landed like a physical thing. The man's face went pale. And then, his eyes widened. Actually widened. Like he'd just seen something that rewrote everything he thought he knew. He stared at Langston, mouth slightly open, color draining from his cheeks. "You," he stammered. "You're—" Karina watched the recognition bloom across the man's face like a bruise. He wasn't just afraid now. He was terrified. "Oh God," the man whispered. "You're actually him." The man's briefcase slipped from his hand. It hit the floor with a dull thud that echoed through the silent store. Nobody picked it up. Nobody moved. His eyes stayed locked on Langston, wide and unblinking, like he was staring at a ghost. "You can't be," his voice cracked. "They said you were." "Said I was what?" Langston's tone was ice. The man shook his head, rapid, jerky movements. "Low profile. Out of the game. Done." Karina's heart pounded. "What game?" The man's arrogance had evaporated completely now, replaced by something raw and primitive. Fear. Real fear. He looked around the store wildly, as if searching for an exit that didn't exist, his breathing quick and shallow. "I didn't," he swallowed hard. "I didn't know you were still." "Still what?" Langston stepped closer. The man flinched. Actually flinched. This was the same person who'd spent 10 minutes destroying Karina in front of strangers, voice dripping with contempt, eyes cold and calculating. Now he looked like a cornered animal. "I was just doing my job," he said, words tumbling out fast. "Just following orders, you have to understand." "Following orders," Langston repeated slowly. "From who?" The man's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. I can't say." "You will." 2 words. But they carried the weight of something absolute. The man's hands shook as he bent to retrieve his briefcase, fingers fumbling with the handle. "This isn't over," he said, but it sounded hollow. Performative. Like he was reading lines he no longer believed. Langston didn't respond. The man straightened, tried to reassemble some shred of dignity. Failed. "You should have told her," he said, quieter now, eyes darting to Karina. "She deserves to know what you don't." Langston's voice cut like a knife. "Don't you dare speak to her." The man's jaw clenched. For a moment, just a flash, something else crossed his face. Not fear. Something harder. Resentment. "She's going to find out eventually," he said. "And when she does, she'll know exactly what kind of man you really are." Karina's chest tightened. "What does that mean?" The man turned toward the exit, hand on the door. Paused. Looked back one last time. Not at Langston. At her. And his expression shifted into something almost pitying. "Ask him about the hearing, Karina," he said softly. "Ask him why he was really there." The door slid open. Cold air rushed in. And then he was gone. The store remained frozen, dozens of strangers holding their breath. Karina turned slowly to her father. "What hearing?" she whispered. Langston's face was unreadable, but his silence told her everything. He was there, at her hearing, the one that nearly destroyed her life. And she never knew. The memory hit Karina like a freight train. All at once. Brutal and complete. She stumbled backward, hand flying to her mouth, eyes wide. No. The fluorescent courtroom lights. The wooden bench that dug into her spine. The voice that shredded every answer she gave, twisting her words into weapons against herself. The attorney. That attorney. Her knees buckled, but she caught herself on the counter. "Oh my God," she whispered. Langston turned sharply. "Karina." That was him. Her voice came out strangled. "That was Dad, that was him." The crowd murmured, confused. But Karina didn't care about them anymore. Everything clicked into place with sickening clarity. The way he'd studied her name tag, not learning her name, but confirming it. The precise cruelty of his words, designed to humiliate, crafted like cross-examination. The briefcase with the initials RT. Randall Thorne. The attorney who'd tried to destroy her 6 months ago. "He was at my hearing," Karina said, louder now, hands shaking. "He was the one who called me a liar, who said I manipulated evidence, who tried to." Her throat closed. The wrongful arrest had been a nightmare. But the hearing was worse. Because Thorne hadn't just defended his client. He'd eviscerated her. Made her sound like a criminal. A con artist. Someone who deserved what happened to her. The jury didn't convict her, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. Her name was mud. Her reputation shattered. Her life dismantled piece by piece. And now, 6 months later, he'd walked into her workplace and done it again. "This wasn't random," Karina breathed. He knew. He knew exactly who I was." Langston's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. "Why?" Karina's voice cracked. "Why would he come here? Why now?" Her father didn't answer. "Dad, why?" The silence stretched too long. And then Karina saw it. The truth written in the tight line of her father's mouth. The way his eyes wouldn't quite meet hers. "You knew," she whispered. "You knew he was coming." Langston's face was stone. "You knew he was following me, and you didn't. I was protecting you. By letting him humiliate me?" Her voice rose, raw and furious. "By standing there and watching while I needed to see what he wanted." Karina stared at her father like she'd never seen him before. "What he wanted," she repeated. "He wanted to destroy me. Again. Mission accomplished." "No." Langston's voice was firm. "He wanted something else." "What?" Langston hesitated. And in that hesitation, Karina felt the ground shift beneath her. "He wasn't here for you," her father said quietly. Karina's breath stopped. "He was here because of me." The store blurred. "And the hearing 6 months ago?" Langston's eyes finally met hers. "That wasn't random either." Karina felt like she'd been punched. "What are you saying?" Her father's voice was barely a whisper. "He targeted you to get to me." Karina waited for her father to look shocked. To look confused, or guilty, or angry. Something that made sense. But Langston's face didn't shift. Not even a flicker. He just stood there, shoulders squared, eyes clear. Like he'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. He expected this conversation. The realization twisted something inside Karina's chest. "How long have you known?" Her voice was barely audible. Langston glanced around the store, at the phone still recording, the strangers still watching, the teenager near the energy drinks whose eyes were wide with fascination. Not here, he said quietly. Yes, here. Karina's voice rose. You just told me I was targeted because of you. You don't get to walk that back now. A woman near the deli counter whispered something to her companion. Langston's jaw tightened, but his expression remained calm. Too calm. Like he'd known this exact moment would arrive and had already decided how to handle it. 6 months ago, he said finally, when you were arrested. Wrongfully arrested. Wrongfully arrested. He corrected without missing a beat. I started asking questions. Karina's hands curled into fists. What kind of questions? About who filed the complaint. About why the charges moved so fast. About why a simple shoplifting accusation turned into a public spectacle. Karina's stomach dropped. She remembered the news vans. The reporters shouting questions. The way her face ended up on every local website with headlines that made her sound like a career criminal. It had felt excessive even then. Disproportionate. You're saying someone set me up? Karina said slowly. Langston didn't deny it. And you've known this for 6 months? I've known longer than that. The admission landed like a slap. Karina stepped back, shaking her head. How much longer? Langston's silence was answer enough. Before the arrest. He'd known before it happened. You let it happen, Karina whispered, the betrayal cutting deeper than anything Thorne had said. You knew I was going to be arrested, and you just, what? Watched. I didn't have proof. You didn't have? Karina's voice cracked. I was handcuffed in a parking lot, Dad. I spent 8 hours in a cell. My name was destroyed. And you were cleared. Because I was innocent. I know that. Then why didn't you stop it? Langston's expression finally shifted. Not guilt. Something harder. Because I needed them to show their hand. The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Them. Not him. Not Thorne. Them. Subscribe if you believe the truth matters. Because this goes deeper than anyone expected. Karina's breath came in short, shallow bursts. Who's them? She asked. Langston's eyes darkened. The people who've been watching you since you were 17. 17. The number echoed in Karina's skull like a bell tolling. She was 32 now, which meant 15 years. 15 years of being watched. Her vision swam. The store, the crowd, her father, all of it blurred into meaningless shapes and colors. All she could see was the hearing. 6 months ago, the courtroom smelled like old wood and industrial cleaner. Karina remembered that. Remembered the way her palms sweated against the witness stand, the way her voice sounded too small in the sterile space. And Randall Thorne, standing 10 feet away, smiling. Miss Holt, he'd said, voice smooth as glass. Would you say you have a history of embellishing the truth? Her lawyer had objected. The judge sustained it. But the question lingered. Thorne had paced slowly, deliberately, letting every juror, every spectator, every reporter absorb the implication. She's a liar. You claim you didn't take the jewelry, he'd continued. But security footage shows you near the display case, doesn't it? I was shopping. Yes or no, Miss Holt? Yes, but... And you were seen leaving the store with a bag, correct? I bought a scarf. Yes or no? Her throat had closed. Yes. Thorne had smiled then, like he'd won. And in a way, he had. Because even though the charges were dropped, even though the evidence cleared her, even though everyone said she was innocent, the stain remained. Karina had lost her job 2 weeks later. Downsizing, they'd said. She'd lost friends. It's just complicated right now, they'd said. She'd lost herself. That part, no one talked about. The nights, she couldn't sleep. The way her hands shook when anyone looked at her too long. The therapist appointments she could barely afford. The fear. The deep, gnawing terror that everyone saw her the way Thorne had painted her. As someone disposable. Someone guilty even when innocent. And now her father was telling her it had all been orchestrated. That she'd been a pawn in something bigger. Something that started when she was still a kid. Her knees threatened to buckle, but Karina locked them. Stand straight. Her therapist's voice echoed in her mind. You survived. You're stronger than you think. But right now, that strength felt like a fragile shell barely holding her together. Who's been watching me? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. And why? Langston's face was grave. Because of what I do, he said quietly. Because of who I've helped. The people I've fought against. You sell insurance. Karina's voice cracked on the absurdity. Her father's expression didn't change. No, he said. I don't. The ground tilted. What? Langston took a breath. I fund legal defense networks, wrongful conviction cases, police misconduct investigations. His voice was measured, careful. I've helped dismantle 3 corrupt precincts in Maryland alone. Karina stared. And I've made enemies doing it. The air left her lungs. Enemies who hurt their children. Langston's silence was confirmation. Karina's buried trauma cracked wide open. Karina's mind raced backward through every moment of the last 15 years. Every setback, every rejection, every time something went wrong, and she couldn't understand why. The scholarship she didn't get senior year, even though her grades were perfect. The apartment application denied for credit issues she'd never had. The job interview that went brilliantly, until it didn't. Had those been them too? Her father watched her process it, and something like regret flickered across his face. Karina, don't. She held up a hand. Just don't. The crowd around them had grown. Word had spread through the store. Something big was happening near checkout 3. An older man in a Orioles cap leaned toward his wife. What's going on? A college-aged girl whispered into her phone, still recording. I don't know, but this is insane. Nobody left. They just circled closer, like witnesses to a car crash. Karina felt their stares like physical weight. But then, the automatic doors slid open again. Randall Thorne stood in the entrance. He hadn't left. Karina's heart lurched. You're still here, she said, voice hollow. Thorne's earlier confidence was gone, replaced by something frantic. His eyes darted between Langston and Karina, calculating. I need to. He stopped mid-sentence, breathing hard. This wasn't supposed to. Wasn't supposed to what? Langston's voice was cold. Thorne took 3 steps inside, and Karina noticed his hands were shaking. Actually shaking. This man, who'd destroyed her in a courtroom with surgical precision, looked unraveled. You didn't tell her, Thorne said, voice barely above a whisper. You didn't tell her who you are. The murmurs in the crowd intensified. Who is he? What's he talking about? Karina turned slowly toward her father. What does he mean, who you are? Her voice was quiet. Dangerous. Langston's jaw worked, but he said nothing. Thorne laughed, a bitter, broken sound. She doesn't know. He looked almost amazed. After everything, you still haven't told her. Told me what? Karina's voice rose. Thorne's eyes locked on hers. Your father isn't just some activist funding legal cases, he said. He's Langston Holt. The Langston Holt. Karina blinked. I know his name. No. Thorne shook his head. You don't understand. He's worth. He stopped, swallowed. He's one of the wealthiest private donors in Maryland justice reform. He's untouchable. Connected to judges, politicians, attorneys general. Karina's world tilted. He's the man who's destroyed careers. Thorne continued, voice rising. Who's buried people who cross him? Whose? That's enough, Langston said quietly. But Thorne wasn't finished. He's the reason I took your case. Karina's breath stopped. What? Thorne's face twisted. I was told to destroy you. To make an example. To show him what happens when he interferes in the wrong people's business. The store went completely silent. Karina felt like she was drowning. Karina couldn't breathe. The words hung in the air, toxic and final. I was told to destroy you. Not because of anything she'd done. Not because of evidence or truth or justice. Because of her father. She turned to Langston, searching his face for denial. For shock. For anything that would make this make sense. But he just stood there, silent and still, like a statue carved from stone. Is that true? Her voice was barely a whisper. Langston's eyes finally met hers. And in them, she saw the answer. Yes. The store seemed to spin. A woman near the produce section gasped. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." Phones captured every second. Thorne backed toward the door, his confession hanging between them like smoke. I didn't want to, he said, voice thin. But they don't give you a choice. You either do what they say or what? Karina's voice cut through the noise, sharp and furious. Or they ruin your life like you ruined mine. Thorne flinched. It wasn't personal. You stood in a courtroom and called me a liar. Karina's voice cracked. You twisted every word I said. You made me sound like a criminal in front of everyone I knew. You destroyed my reputation, my job, my... Her throat closed. She couldn't finish. Thorne looked down, shame flickering across his face. But Karina didn't care about his shame. She cared about the truth. She turned back to her father. Did you know? She asked. Did you know he was paid to come after me? Langston's silence lasted 3 seconds too long. You did, Karina breathed. You knew. And you let it happen anyway. I didn't have proof, Langston said quietly. Only suspicions. Suspicions? Karina laughed, but it sounded broken. I was arrested. Humiliated. My life fell apart. And you had suspicions? I was gathering evidence. I didn't need evidence. Her voice echoed through the store. I needed my father. The words hit like a hammer. Langston's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. You're right, he said quietly. The admission stunned her. I should have told you, Langston continued. I should have protected you differently. But I was trying to. To what? Catch the bad guys. Karina's voice trembled. I'm your daughter. Not bait. Langston's face cracked. Just barely, but she saw it. Pain. Real, deep pain. I know, he said softly. The crowd watched, riveted. Thorne shifted near the door, clearly wanting to leave, but frozen by the weight of what was unfolding. Karina felt tears sting her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of these people. Who are you? She whispered. Langston took a slow breath. Someone who's made too many enemies, he said. Someone who thought he could keep you safe by keeping you separate from his work. Well, it didn't work. No, Langston agreed. It didn't. He stepped closer. But she doesn't need my money or my name to deserve respect. His voice carried across the store, clear, firm, undeniable. Whispers erupted. Wait, how much money? Who is this guy? Did he say his name? The whispers grew louder. A man near the pharmacy pulled out his phone, fingers flying across the screen. 5 seconds later, his eyes widened. Holy, he turned to his wife. Look at this. Others did the same. Searching, scrolling, reading. Karina watched confusion ripple through the crowd, transforming into recognition. Langston Holt, someone murmured. The Langston Holt. Wait, the justice reform guy? He donated like millions to that wrongful conviction project. 15 million, another voice corrected. I read about it. Karina's head snapped toward her father. 15 million? Langston stood perfectly still, watching the realization spread through the store like wildfire. A woman near the deli gasped. He's the one who took down that prosecutor in Baltimore. The one who was falsifying evidence. And the police chief in Frederick County. My cousin's lawyer said he's basically untouchable. Connections to the state attorney general, federal judges. The words piled on top of each other, each one adding weight to something Karina couldn't process. Thorne's face had gone chalk white. You didn't know? He whispered, staring at Karina. You really didn't know. Karina's hands trembled. Know what? But even as she said it, the pieces were falling into place. Her father's insurance job that somehow paid for her college tuition without loans. The way he always seemed calm during financial emergencies. The phone calls he took in another room. The meetings he never talked about. Oh God. How much? Her voice came out strangled. Langston's expression was unreadable. How much money do you have? Karina pressed. Silence. A man in the crowd spoke up. According to this article, his net worth is estimated at 83 million, Langston said quietly. The store went dead silent. Karina felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. $83 million. Her father, her quiet, modest father who drove a 10-year-old Honda and clipped coupons, was worth $83 million. I don't understand, she whispered. Langston's eyes held steady on hers. After what happened last winter, he said slowly. After you were targeted, I liquidated most of my visible assets. Moved everything into trusts and private foundations. Made myself look smaller. To protect me, Karina said numbly. To protect you. Her mind spun backward. Last winter, the wrongful arrest wasn't the beginning. It was the escalation. Something had happened before that. Something her father had been shielding her from. Something that made him hide an 8-figure fortune. Thorne took a shaky step backward. I didn't know, he said, voice cracking. When they told me to go after her, they said you were just some activist. Some small-time donor. They didn't say. Who's they? Karina's voice was steel. Thorne's face crumpled. I can't. You already confessed to destroying an innocent woman's life, Langston said coldly. Start talking. Thorne looked trapped. Broken. And then, barely audible. The same people who've been after you for 3 years. Karina's blood went cold. 3 years. 3 years. The number sat in Karina's chest like a stone. 3 years of being hunted. 3 years of her life unraveling in ways she'd thought were random. Nothing was random. Thorne looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. But Langston moved closer, blocking his path to the door. You said you were following her, Langston said, voice low and controlled. For 3 weeks. Thorne nodded weakly. Why now? Langston pressed. What changed? Thorne's eyes darted around the store, searching for escape. I was told to check on her. Make sure she was. Make sure she was what? Vulnerable. The word came out like a confession. Isolated. Easy to. He stopped. Karina's stomach turned. Easy to what? She demanded. Thorne didn't answer. Langston's expression darkened. You weren't just following her, he said slowly. You were preparing something. Thorne's silence confirmed it. A woman in the crowd whispered, should someone call the police? But nobody moved. This felt bigger than police. Karina's mind raced. Dad? She said carefully. How did you know he was here today? Langston's jaw tightened. Because I've been tracking him. The admission landed like a thunderclap. For how long? Karina asked. 6 weeks. Karina's breath caught. 6 weeks. Not 3. You've been watching him watch me? Her voice rose. And you didn't think to tell me? I couldn't risk tipping him off, Langston said. I needed to know who he was reporting to. What they were planning. Karina felt fury and betrayal twist inside her. So you used me as bait. Again. I was protecting you. By lying. Langston's face hardened. By doing what I had to do to keep you alive. The word alive echoed through the store. Phones captured every syllable. Someone near the bakery muttered, this is insane. Karina stared at her father, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not as the quiet man who raised her, but as someone else entirely. Someone dangerous. Someone powerful. Someone who'd been fighting a war she didn't know existed. What happened last winter? She asked quietly. The real story. Not the version you gave me. Langston hesitated. And Thorne, broken, terrified Thorne, laughed. It was a hollow, desperate sound. You didn't tell her about that either? He shook his head. God, you really kept her in the dark. Shut up, Langston warned. But Thorne was past caring. Last winter wasn't just about you, he said to Langston. It was about her. It was always about her. Karina's heart pounded. What are you talking about? Thorne's eyes locked on hers. The people your father's been fighting? The ones who've been targeting you for 3 years. He paused. Swallowed. They're not trying to hurt you to punish him. Karina's blood turned to ice. Subscribe now, because the truth is darker than you can imagine. Then why? She whispered. Thorne's voice dropped. Because you're the reason he started all of this. Karina felt the words crack through her like lightning. You're the reason he started all of this. What does that mean? Her voice barely worked. But Thorne wasn't looking at her anymore. His eyes had shifted, darting toward the entrance, then the back of the store, then the windows. Searching. Hunting. Langston noticed immediately. Who are you looking for? His voice went cold. Thorne's breathing quickened. I told you, he said. I wasn't just here to humiliate her. Then why? Karina demanded. Thorne's hands shook as he adjusted his blazer. I was told to confirm something. Confirm what? He didn't answer. Langston stepped forward, blocking Thorne's line of sight. You said you were following someone, he said quietly. Not shopping. Not browsing. Following. Thorne swallowed hard. Yes. Who? Thorne's eyes flicked past Langston toward the produce section, then toward the pharmacy, then back to the entrance. Karina's skin crawled. Is someone else here? She whispered. Thorne's silence was answer enough. Langston's entire body shifted into something sharper. How many? He asked. I don't, Thorne stammered. I was just supposed to verify. How many people are watching her right now? The crowd stirred, suddenly aware they might be part of something dangerous. A man near the registers grabbed his daughter's hand. A woman backed toward the exit. Thorne's face crumpled. 2, he whispered. Maybe 3. Karina's heart slammed against her ribs. Where? Thorne shook his head. I don't know. They don't tell me everything. I'm just the distraction. The word landed like a bomb. Distraction. Karina's mind raced. While Thorne humiliated her, drew a crowd, created a scene. Someone else was doing something. Watching something. Or someone. Langston's jaw clenched. You weren't here for Karina, he said slowly. Thorne hesitated, then shook his head. Not just her. Karina felt ice flood her veins. Then who? Thorne's eyes finally settled on something. Someone, across the store. An older woman in a blue cardigan stood near the dairy section, holding a gallon of milk. She looked completely ordinary. Unremarkable. But Thorne stared at her like she was a ghost. Her, he whispered. Karina followed his gaze. The woman noticed the attention. Her expression shifted, just for a flash, from neutral to sharp, aware. And then she set down the milk, turned, and walked calmly toward the back exit. Langston moved instantly. "Stay here," he told Karina. But Karina grabbed his arm. "Who is she?" Langston's face was unreadable. "Someone who shouldn't be alive." The words hung in the air like smoke. And before Karina could respond, Langston was moving, cutting through the aisles with precise, controlled urgency. Thorne stood frozen, pale and trembling. Karina turned to him. "Who was that woman?" she demanded. Thorne's voice was barely audible. "The person who hurt you last winter." Karina's world stopped. The woman in the blue cardigan, ordinary, unassuming, was the one who destroyed her life. And she was here, right now. The woman disappeared through the back exit. Langston followed. And Karina stood in the middle of Fairview Market, surrounded by strangers and phones and the wreckage of everything she thought she knew. Her father was a millionaire. She'd been targeted for 3 years. The woman who destroyed her life was here. And her father had known. All of it. He'd known and said nothing. Karina's chest tightened, each breath sharper than the last. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. She wanted to rewind 6 months, a year, 3 years, back to when her biggest problem was deciding on a college major, when her father was just her father, when the world made sense. But that world was gone. Maybe it had never existed. Thorne stood a few feet away, looking like he might collapse. "Why didn't he tell me?" Karina's voice cracked. Thorne blinked at her, surprised she was even talking to him. "I don't." "You know something," she said. "You've been part of this. Why did he keep me in the dark?" Thorne's face softened, just slightly. "Because he loves you," he said quietly. The words felt like a slap. "That's not love," Karina shot back. "Love doesn't lie." "No," Thorne agreed. "But protection does." Karina stared at him. "He wasn't hiding things to hurt you." Thorne continued, voice low. "He was hiding them because the people after him, after you, they use information like a weapon. The less you knew, the safer you were." "I wasn't safe," Karina whispered. "I was arrested. Humiliated. My life fell apart. But you're alive." The bluntness of it stopped her cold. Thorne's eyes were hollow. "The people your father's fighting," he said, "they don't just ruin lives. They end them. And he's been standing between you and them for years." Karina felt something crack inside her chest. All this time, she'd thought her father was distant, secretive, emotionally unavailable. But he wasn't absent. He was standing guard, fighting battles she never saw, taking hits meant for her. The realization didn't erase the betrayal, but it complicated it. She felt furious and grateful all at once, betrayed and protected, lied to and loved. It was unbearable. A commotion erupted near the back of the store. Voices, shouting. Karina's head snapped up. Thorne paled. "We need to go," he said urgently. "What?" "Now, Karina. We need to leave now." But before she could move, the back door slammed open. Langston appeared, chest heaving, eyes wild. He wasn't alone. 2 security guards flanked him, faces grim. And between them, the woman in the blue cardigan, handcuffed. Her expression was calm. Too calm. Like she'd expected this. Like this was all part of a plan. Langston's eyes found Karina's. "We need to talk," he said. And the woman smiled. "Yes, Karina," she said softly. "Let's talk about what really happened last winter." The store erupted. Not into chaos, into something stranger. A collective sharp intake of breath, followed by absolute stillness. 50 people stood frozen, phones raised, recording a scene they didn't fully understand but knew was massive. A grandmother near the bread aisle whispered, "Is that woman under arrest?" A teenager muttered, "This is better than Netflix." Someone else, "Should we leave?" But nobody moved. They just watched, transfixed, as Langston Holt, mild-mannered man with a bag of oranges, stood flanked by security guards, holding a handcuffed woman who looked utterly unbothered by her situation. Karina couldn't breathe. The woman's eyes stayed locked on her, that eerie smile never wavering. "What did you do to me?" Karina's voice came out hoarse. The woman tilted her head, considering. "I did what I was paid to do," she said simply. Langston's jaw tightened. "Don't say another word." "Why not?" The woman's smile widened. "She deserves the truth, doesn't she? You've kept her blind for years." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "What's she talking about? Who is that? I don't understand what's happening." Thorne backed toward the exit, trying to blend into the growing audience. But Langston's eyes tracked him. "Stay where you are," Langston said quietly. His voice wasn't loud. but it cut through the noise like a blade. Thorne froze mid-step. One of the security guards, a burly man named Marcus according to his name tag, looked between Langston and the woman, clearly trying to piece together who was in charge here. "Sir," Marcus said carefully, "we need to know what's going on." "Call the police," Langston said. "Already did," the other guard replied. "They're 10 minutes out." The woman laughed, a soft, musical sound that made Karina's skin crawl. 10 minutes, she repeated. "That's plenty of time." "For what?" Karina demanded. The woman's eyes glittered. "To tell you what your father's been hiding." Langston stepped forward, positioning himself between Karina and the woman. "You don't get to speak to her," he said, voice low and dangerous. But the woman wasn't intimidated. "I already did," she said. "Last winter. Remember, Karina?" Karina's stomach dropped. Last winter. The arrest. The holding cell. Oh God. A memory surfaced, hazy and incomplete. There had been a woman in the cell with her. Older. Quiet. She'd asked Karina questions. Gentle, probing questions about her family, her father, where she worked. Karina had thought she was just being kind, making conversation. But now, "You were there," Karina whispered. "In the cell. You were. Gathering information," the woman finished. "And you gave me everything I needed." Karina felt sick. Thorne tried again to move toward the door. Langston's head turned fractionally. Didn't say a word. Just looked at him. And Thorne stopped. Completely. Like he'd been pinned in place by sheer force of will. The crowd noticed. "Who is this guy?" someone whispered. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, hand hovering near his radio. "Sir, I need you to explain." "Not yet," Langston said calmly. Marcus hesitated, then nodded, because something about Langston Holt commanded obedience. Langston turned his full attention to the woman in handcuffs. The temperature in the store seemed to drop. "You came back for a reason," he said quietly. The woman's smile didn't falter. "Maybe I missed the ambience," she said. "Fairview Market has such charm." "You came back," Langston repeated, voice harder now. "Because someone sent you." The woman's expression finally shifted. Not fear. Calculation. "You're smarter than they give you credit for," she said. "Who sent you?" She laughed softly. "You know I can't tell you that." Langston took one step closer. Just one. But the woman's smile cracked. "You will," he said. "Eventually." The certainty in his voice sent a ripple through the crowd. Marcus exchanged a glance with the other guard, both clearly wondering if they should intervene. But something kept them still. Maybe it was the way Langston carried himself. Calm, controlled, but radiating a quiet danger that didn't require raised voices or physical threats. The woman's eyes narrowed. "You can't touch me," she said. "Not here. Not with all these witnesses." "I don't need to touch you," Langston replied. "I just need to make sure you understand something." "And what's that?" Langston's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. But in the silence of the store, everyone heard. "You came after my daughter once. I let it play out because I needed proof. I needed to trace it back to the source." The woman's jaw tightened. "But now," Langston continued, "now I have everything I need. Names, transactions, communications. All of it." The woman's facade cracked further. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Silence. The woman's breathing quickened, just slightly, but Karina saw it. "You came here thinking you still had leverage," Langston said. "Thinking you could intimidate her, threaten her, make her vulnerable again." He leaned in. "You were wrong." The woman tried to maintain her composure, but her hands trembled in the cuffs. "This isn't over," she said. "No," Langston agreed. "It's not." His eyes were steel. "But this time, you won't walk away clean." The phrase echoed through the store. Phones captured every word. The woman's mask finally shattered. Fear, real, visceral fear, flooded her features. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," she whispered. "I understand perfectly," Langston said. "And so will they. When I'm done, everyone will know exactly who you work for and what you've done." Subscribe if you believe justice should catch everyone, because this story isn't finished. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The woman's eyes darted toward the entrance. Trapped, Karina watched her father, this stranger who looked like her father, and felt something shift inside her. He wasn't just protecting her. He was dismantling an entire operation, brick by brick, name by name, and he'd been doing it for years. Langston turned to Karina, and his expression softened. "Just barely. I need you to listen carefully," he said. Karina nodded, throat tight. She wasn't here for you. Karina blinked, confused. Then, Langston's next words shattered everything. She was here for the person who hurt you last winter. The one who set everything in motion. Karina's heart stopped. What are you saying? Langston's face was grave. That person isn't in custody. They never were. The air left Karina's lungs. And they're back. The sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights flashed through the store windows. The woman in handcuffs smiled again, but this time it looked different. Triumphant. Too late, she whispered. Langston's head snapped toward her. What? The woman's eyes glittered with something dark. You think you caught me? She laughed. I've been caught before. That's not what matters. Karina's pulse hammered. Then what does? She demanded. The woman's gaze slid to her, and Karina saw genuine pity there. You still don't understand, she said softly. This was never about stopping you or your father. Then what? It was about drawing them out. The words landed like ice water. Langston went rigid. Who? His voice was sharp, urgent. Who did you draw out? The woman didn't answer. She just looked past them, toward the entrance. Karina turned. The automatic doors slid open. Police officers entered, hands on their belts, scanning the scene. But behind them, a figure stood in the parking lot, backlit by the afternoon sun. Too far away to see clearly. Just a silhouette. Watching, Karina's breath caught. Something about the way they stood, the tilt of their head, the set of their shoulders, felt familiar. Impossibly familiar. Langston saw them too. His entire body went still. No, he breathed. The woman in handcuffs laughed softly. Yes. Karina's eyes stayed locked on the figure outside. Who is that? She whispered. Langston's face had gone pale. Someone who was supposed to be gone, he said. Someone I paid everything to make disappear. Who? Karina's voice rose. The figure took one step forward, into the light, and Karina's world exploded. Because she recognized them. Not from last winter. From before. From the part of her life she'd buried so deep she'd almost convinced herself it never happened. Her hands started shaking uncontrollably. That's impossible, she whispered. Langston grabbed her arm, voice urgent. We need to leave. Now. But Karina couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't process what she was seeing. The woman in handcuffs spoke one last time, voice carrying through the chaos. He wasn't here for you, Karina. Karina's eyes burned with tears she didn't understand. The woman's final words cut like a blade. He was here for the person who hurt you last winter. Karina's knees buckled. Because the figure outside, the one watching, waiting, wasn't a stranger. Wasn't some faceless enemy. The person who changed her life forever. Who set everything in motion. Who destroyed her and disappeared. Was back. And Langston's expression, raw terror mixed with something that looked like grief, told her one final, devastating truth. Her father had known they'd return. He'd always known. The figure raised one hand. Not threatening. Waving. Like they'd been waiting for this moment. Like this was all part of the plan. Karina's voice came out broken. Dad, who is that? Langston's answer shattered everything she thought she knew. Someone I should have told you about 17 years ago. The door slid shut. The figure smiled. And Karina realized. This was never the end. It was the beginning.